So what I have here is the haul from the last, I don't know, 2 weeks, man. I went a little crazy on eBay last month. I've hit a flea market here and there, ordered a few things online. So I figured I'd just go ahead and show this stuff as always because I need to put it up and catalog it and read a few things. Um, so I have no idea where I left off the last time I did a haul video, but we're just going to show what I have here. Okay. So these were amazing because these ended up being, I think I did the math. I paid $15 for this and a few comics. So after you do the math, I think they're around, I don't know, 70, 75 cents. And a lot of this stuff I don't know a lot about, which makes it very exciting. But here's something from around 1992, I believe, from Kitchen Sink Press, the acid bath, right? 1950s detective, a guy who is pretty nasty, and they make a point to make sure you know that he's also short, ends up trying to track down a serial killer who pretty much puts people in the acid bath. This was actually pretty cool. I'm not going to say it was the best written book, but I absolutely loved the artwork in it. A lot of great detail in it, and I love the pages where we got the negative effect here, if you will. Black paper on with white ink. I'm assuming that's what made it interesting. Like I said, not the best written book, but enough to keep you satisfied and occupied. Okay, now this series of books, I really like these. These are 2000 AD stories. Here's a checklist for what they have. I have a couple of the Judge Dredd books from who puts these out. Again, these are from the 80s. And apparently, as you can see, this is book 2 of the VCs, written by Jerry Finley Day. I know absolutely nothing about it, but when I found these at the mall at a card show, and I knew it was 2000 AD, I am so there. And it's 80s 2000 AD, so that's even better. Beautiful cover on this. Love this set. And then I was very excited to find this, a 1978 edition of The Adventures of Tintin, Tintin in America. Tintin is somebody that I've known about. There was a fantastic movie done by, who was it, Paul Jackson and Steven Spielberg, which I heard from people who have grown up on Tintin and read Tintin, didn't really catch the flavor of the book. So I'm very excited to find this. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing when I looked in that short box. Um, some indie stuff. Now, this is from the 80s, and like I said, in the 80s, indie books were referred to as alternative. They came after the underground books. So some great magazines with some cool indie stuff in it. Can't wait to get in here and see if I recognize any of these names. So that's cool. Here's another one. Heartbreak Comics. Know absolutely nothing about this, from Eclipse Books. Like I said, this is from the 80s. So we get to go in there and read some more alternative comics. And like I said, back in the day when I finally did get a hold of some alternative comics there in the mid to late 80s, you really felt like you were reading something you weren't supposed to. Mature themes. These things had an atmosphere all of its own. And obviously, I'm pretty sure all of this is coming out after the great black and white boom that hit after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles took off. I'm not even going to open this one. This was just in the box, and I figured, hey, why not? We'll just grab it. But as you can see, this is some racy stuff here from Rip Off Comics Presents. So, there we go. Now, this took me back. I'm 99.9%. I had so many Star Wars books when I was growing up. But this is from 1983. This is the actual Star Wars book, storybook, when the movie came out, or Return of the Jedi. Oh, very cool to see this. I love this stuff. It's really odd. A lot of people want their action figures, and of course I would too, don't get me wrong. But there's just something about the books I own. I own so many books, and luckily I own a lot of the comics I still had back in the movie adaptations. Had to grab this. I have never seen anything more 80s. More 80s. I mean, look at the boldness of those colors. But this is from Pete Milligan, Brett Owens, and Steve Dillon, who would go on to be on Preacher in the 90s. So again, absolutely, I know nothing about this. I don't know if he popped up in 2000 AD, but it feels very British. And my big clue was that it was £5.95. So can't wait to get in there and see what this is about. Arsenic Lullaby, the pulp edition. Again, I think this is probably like a 90s. Know nothing about it. But Brett, Warren Ellis said it made him smile. It has some great blurbs on there for something that looks very simple. So I'm hoping the storytelling really captures the very thin black and white art. I don't know if you guys ever really role played for who's watching this, but recently on a episode of Cavern of Chaos, I was talking about how over the years people have tried to tell me that comic books would probably one of the reasons I loved comic books was that feeling of nostalgia. Like nostalgia was very powerful, and that's kind of what you try to capture every time you read comics. And with me, I'm adamant, and I know for sure that no, that's not what makes me very nostalgic for the younger days. But it's the role playing. If you hand me a bunch of Dragon magazines and AD&D second edition, I'm so there. And in the 90s, after I'd quit playing because everybody I played with, everyone who I would campaign with were older than me. A lot of my friends were older than me. By the time I got into my freshman year in high school, all of my buddies graduated and they took off to the Army, Navy, and Marines. So I was kind of left with making a whole new crew and stuff, or went off, a few of them went off to college. But in the 90s, when I had a new crew, we would play White Wolf games, Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire the Dark Ages, Werewolf the Apocalypse. And right when I quit, apparently they came out with Hunter the Reckoning. This is a survival guide that apparently you got to play a hunter in that world. Again, in the 90s, it was all about the White Wolf games. Now, this, I've heard about this for years, and it's Sketchbook Diaries. I think this is the second volume, and it's from Top Shelf. This is from the early 2000s. And basically, it's not a story. The man who did this book, apparently, he would spend a few minutes a day doing exactly what it says in here, sketching out a day. 4 panels for every day, and it comes with dates on it. And what's amazing about this is that this particular volume, I think there's only 3 or 4 that I know of, grain of salt there. But what's particular about this is that you really get a feel for how the world felt before 9/11, the day of 9/11, and after 9/11, because this is the year that takes place in the year 2001. And I was really like, this is phenomenal just for that historic time. Somebody was documenting their life around that time. Now I want to show you a hardback in a minute that I got, but I was amazed because I've already tracked this down on eBay, ordered it, a hardback, the Dark Horse edition, and then when I looked in the box and I found the same volume, but this one is put up by Eclipse Comics. But it is Bean World, what I've wanted to check out for a while. I've been told that there's nothing quite like reading Bean World. And this is the first 9 issues. Bean World was put out by Eclipse Comics, of course, in the 80s. And I think, what was his name? Mr. Spook is the main Bean there. And this guy. And he was in Total Eclipse, which was a miniseries that Eclipse Comics put out towards the end of the 80s to celebrate an anniversary. And it was their version of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And they took a lot of characters that had shown up in Eclipse Comics, their creator-owned and whatnot. But they had popped up and they mixed them together. Around 2012 or 13, I got to meet George Perez and Marv Wolfman. I was standing in line at Heroes Con waiting my turn. And you had Marv Wolfman, and then beside of him, you had George Perez. And there was a line with George Perez because he was drawing sketches for $30 of any character you wanted to talk about. So while I was standing there and I got my Crisis on Infinite Earth books, the one I had since I was 12, signed by Marv and waiting on George to sign them, I kind of looked over at Marv and was like, so Total Eclipse, what was up with that? And he was right on it. He said that was a favor for a friend, and none of those characters should ever be together. They just didn't work. Something from the early 2000s, Electric Girl. Never heard of this, but again, it looks interesting. I would talk about these if I knew this, but this was the first book I pulled out. Night of the Enemy, Harlan Ellison, Ken Stacy, and I think this is all airbrushed. So the art in it is airbrushed with a Harlan Ellison story. And I love how we get to see who these guys are on the back. Kimiko? Yeah, Kimiko put this out in the late 80s. So it's a cool little graphic novel. Little prose in there, it looks like. Now, I got this Vortex this is from 1982. And it's very interesting because apparently this is the first appearance of Mr. X. And if you've been watching my channel and you've been watching Cavern of Chaos, turns out I was the last person in the world, considered I've been collecting comics since 1977, who knew about Mr. X. I knew the name Mr. X. I'd run across some Mr. X and I think some Dark Horse Presents in dollar boxes, but I never picked him up. And it turns out this is a very influential character. But this is an anthology series, and I don't think Mr. X appears in the book. He just made the cover. So go figure. I don't know if that's considered a first appearance or not. Very interesting. And then I know what this is. This is Void Indigo by Steve Gerber. I think this is 82 or 83. It's a Marvel graphic novel, as you can see, when they were putting them out. And you can tell it's of its era. But one of the things I love is that it still has the flyer in it for the series of Void Indigo that was coming out, announcing it. So I'm assuming this was a jump on point. Now, this is Steve Gerber, so you don't get a comic book story, you get a mind trip, because that's what he wrote. And I love the flavor of this. I mean, this is 1981, 1982 heavy metal in my eyes. Void Indigo, even that name. Seems like there was a post-punk new wave band called Void Indigo, but I could be wrong. Now, this is what I ordered off of eBay, off of a guy. All these books came to less than $10. I have some Usagi Yojimbo, volume 33, of this set of trades. As you can see, it's not a huge trade in size, but it's packed with a lot of story. And let's see, what is this? I think this is like in the 100s that it prints. I have a couple trades of this now. $166 to $172. And this came out in 2018 from Dark Horse, so that was cool to get. And here's the hardback of Bean World that Dark Horse put out. That soft cover I just shown you was from Eclipse in the late 80s, and this is the one that Dark Horse put out a few years ago. So that's just cool. And then, of course, I got this DC Archives, still sealed, brand new. If I understand it, it's out of print. This is from the early 2000s. But some Kirby goodness that predates the Fantastic Four. A lot of people read the Challengers of the Unknown of those days, and they're just like, Kirby created the Fantastic Four. All you got to do is read Challengers of the Unknown. And I was actually going to save this. I was going to save this till the end, but we'll go ahead and show these before I get to the comics. Found this half off on Amazon. This is my second library edition of the Hellboy books. I now have the first one, which has Seed of Destruction and Wake the Devil, the first two Hellboy stories with an assist from John Byrne. And I also have the last one, Hellboy in Hell. So I don't know if I'll get anything in the middle there. So this is fantastic. This was fantastic. And then I'll go ahead and show this. This is a Kickstarter from Dave Sim where we get Spawn number 10. This is why it'll get its own video, because this is a very important book that is as relevant today about creators' right as it is back then. When Image was taken off and Spawn was taken off, Todd McFarlane ended up hiring Alan Moore, Dave Sim, Frank Miller, and there was one more writer. Who am I forgetting? Dave Sim, Frank Miller, Alan Moore. Oh, Neil Gaiman. And then later on, he got Grant Morrison to come in, and they did these one in and out stories of Spawn. And he went back, and Todd McFarlane actually drew Cerebus, and Dave Sims said that Todd McFarlane drew the ultimate Cerebus, because in that 1 month of everybody buying Spawn 10 in 1992, more people saw Spawn that month than in the decades before of the actual series. So there's some sketchbooks and I think a little interview in there. It's black and white and it comes with some extra stuff there. Now here's some comics that I got. I got this off eBay. I'm a Defiant comic fan. There's a whole story about Defiant Comics. Jim Shooter was sort of forced out of Valiant, and he formed Defiant. Marvel ended up taking them to court, and Marvel lost, but Defiant shut down because they used all their resources winning in court. So I got on eBay and I found these. War Dancer, signed by Jim Shooter. And now with this issue, I now own every comic of a Dead Universe. This was a 0 issue in Hero, also signed by Jim Shooter. Now, Tim, why do you, Hellermouse, Tim, whatever you want to call me, why do you have Doom 2099? Because this is some early Warren Ellis stuff. He scripts this one. And by the way, this says after Kirby. And usually I know my Kirby, and this does look familiar, but I have no idea what cover that's homaging, so you can put it in the comments if you know. But yeah, Warren Ellis came out, scripted the first 24 and 25, then he took over until issue 39. So yeah, I grabbed these. It's not the complete run, but you can tell by the time we get to issue 31, that is all Ellis. And this is early Ellis. This is very early Ellis, Warren Ellis, if you're a fan of his work. Big fan of his Stormwatch and Planetary work. But you can feel the Warren Ellis on this before there was a Warren Ellis. And then, where did I get these? Oh, yeah, these were also under $1. Some Mark Miller, Phil Hester, Swamp Thing coming towards the end of the series, 153. And I didn't really want to get these, but these are probably worth $10 to $15 a piece. But these are Batman, DC 52, The Court of Owls, number 4, like in very good shape. And they were just sitting there, and I'm like, oh, I'll get them. I'm going to complete this set because it's George Perez art, but it's Ultraverse, the Ultra Force. And then I think this is also probably about a $15 book. Not that I really keep up with things, but like I said, I'm not a fan of the DC 52, but that's a variant sketch cover. That's very cool. I got this to stick in my Tales of the Teen Titans. This is one of those books I'm not quite sure what happened, how it came out of what happened with my collection. But in issue 58 of Tales of the Teen Titans, that was the last original story before with issue 60, before they started reprinting the Baxter series. The Trigon War, fight they had with them, if you're familiar with that. But issue 59 went ahead and reprinted, I think this is a story from DC Comics Presents number 26. Where it all started. These are upgrades, and I will grab these all day. I can read and reread this 80s Keith Giffen stuff. Special Legion of Substitute Heroes, Ambush Bug. I saw this in there and I was like, well, I want to check out Lords of the Ultra Realm. I think those were from antique shops. I found these at a flea market. They're a little beat up on the back, but these were also less than $1. New Mutants number 24. I had a lot of the Sienkiewicz covers and New Mutant stuff there back when I was 12. I still have the first appearance of Legion. But I figured I'd pick up these. I was like, they're there. And I laughed when I saw this at a flea market here. Spawn number 9, the Neil Gaiman issue. First appearance of Angela. And I'm telling you, despite Marvel completely screwing her up, I think there's some life there. Some more New Mutants. 75 cents. Nice. All right. So I'm sure I probably left out a few things, but that's the haul so far for this month. So everybody be excellent to each other.